Have you ever wondered why the more you want to rise, the more you feel the need to stay away from the crowd? Why do the brightest moments in life so often arrive when no one is beside you, when the phone is silent, when the room holds nothing but the sound of your own breathing? Nietzsche believed that to live alone, we must carry both a beast and a god at the same time. The beast is the instinct to survive, a rawness that doesn't need to perform. God is the ability to write the law of your own life, to stand upright without needing anyone's approval. In solitude, no gaze forces you to be good in the way others like. No demand pulls you away from what you truly think. You begin to hear the deepest voice, including the parts of yourself you hate the most. Yet it is precisely there that greatness is forged, because no one saves you but you. In this video, I will show how Nietzsche uses solitude to break herd morality, turn nihilism into fuel, and place you before a ruthless question. If you had to live this life again an infinite number of times, would you dare choose the very life you are living now? Number 1. Clearly distinguishing solitude versus loneliness. There is a mistake that makes many people condemn themselves as weak. They call every moment of being alone loneliness. But Nietzsche would not grant you that easy escape. He does not care whether you are alone or not. He looks at only one thing. In that aloneness, are you being left behind or are you choosing it? The two words sound similar, but they stand on opposite sides of an abyss. One side is a wound, the other side is discipline. One shrinks you, the other makes you grow. Loneliness is a passive state. You can sit in a packed cafe, your phone full of notifications, and still feel hollow, as if something has been carved out of you. Because what you lack is not noise, but the feeling of being seen, accepted, inside the circle. Loneliness is like an alarm signal in the brain. You're being left behind. You're being cast out. It triggers an ancient panic, the kind early humans felt when separated from the tribe. And when that panic speaks, freedom disappears. You start doing anything to get back in, texting someone who doesn't value you, joining a gathering you don't even want. Solitude is different. Solitude is an active state. Solitude is a space where other people's eyes no longer pull your hand toward your roles. No one remains for you to explain yourself to. No one remains for you to be pleasant for. And most importantly, no one remains for you to hide behind. Many people think solitude is a feeling. Nietzsche sees it as a capacity, a form of spiritual discipline. Being alone can be a circumstance. You just broke up, moved cities, lost your job, or got abandoned. But solitude is a choice. You lock the door, mute the noise, and step away from the world to protect what is forming inside you. You do not wait for others to leave. You choose to leave the places that make you forget who you are. And here, a ruthless secret is revealed. Some people are alone, but not in solitude at all, because they drag the whole world into the room through screens, messages, comparison, and the fear of being forgotten. They cannot endure even a minute without a response. They call it connection, but in truth, it is a rope. Loneliness is like standing under a street lamp on a rainy night, waiting for someone to come back and pick you up. Solitude is like holding a flashlight and walking straight into the forest, uncertain of the path, but certain of one thing. If you keep standing there waiting, life will pass, and you will still be the one asking for permission. This is where Nietzsche asks a question that hurts. Do you want to be loved, or do you want to be free? Because freedom has a price. And that price often takes the shape of solitude. You can see this difference in ordinary life. Someone gets left on red by friends, stares at the dark screen, heart racing, mind running through scenarios. What did I say wrong? Do they hate me now? That feeling makes you smaller, makes you frantic to edit yourself until you fit them. But another person also turns off the phone, also stays silent, also sits there, and instead of asking, "Am I being abandoned?" that person asks, "What am I avoiding within myself?" The second question is the gateway to solitude. It is not gentle, but it is real. It forces you to look at the mechanisms inside you. Dependence on approval, fear of judgment, the habit of fleeing emptiness with noise. When you stare straight at that mechanism, you begin to dismantle it. And when you dismantle it, you step into a level of freedom most people never touch in their entire lives. Nietzsche warned about the herd as a kind of moral gravity. The herd does not need you to be right. The herd needs you to be the same. The herd rewards conformity and punishes difference by isolating you. That is why loneliness often appears like a social sentence. Being met with silence, being ignored, being seen as weird. And this is where many people collapse. They fear exclusion so much that they accept living against themselves just to stay inside the circle. But solitude is the moment you reverse that power. You tell the herd through silence, "You don't need to cast me out. I'm stepping out on my own." The turn sounds small, but it is an overthrow. It turns you from a victim into a chooser. It takes back sovereignty. Here is an easy metaphor. Loneliness is like being locked in a soundproof room where you scream, and no one hears. Solitude is like entering an ancient library at midnight, where every sound becomes clear, even the sound of your own thinking. In that library, shallow living is no longer allowed. You will hear the questions you dodge in daylight. What are you living for? Who are you chasing? Do you truly believe what you keep saying? Those questions do not come to comfort you. They come to peel your skin off. And precisely because they peel your skin, they heal in Nietzsche's way, not by slapping a bandage over a dirty wound, but by washing it until it hurts, so it does not rot. Loneliness often wants a quick dose, a date, a call, a screen lighting up. Solitude does not look for medicine. Solitude trains the ability to sit still without betraying yourself. That ability is so rare it feels like a privilege of the strong. The strong are not strong because they need no one, but because they do not need someone else to escape themselves. The strong can love, can bond, can live among people, but they do not let the community decide who they are. The strong enter solitude like an artist entering a studio. They go into shape, to revise, to cut away the excess, to make their life sharper and truer. And that is why greatness is not born from loneliness. Loneliness is only the pit you fall into when you live dependent on acceptance. Greatness is born from the ability to turn being alone into solitude. When you still see being alone as failure, you will cling to anyone so you don't fall. When you see solitude as discipline, you begin to choose who deserves to step into your life and what deserves your time. Then you stop begging others to fill the emptiness. You turn emptiness into space. You turn silence into a forge. And here is the line you should keep in your mind, like a small blade. Loneliness is being left behind. Solitude is choosing to walk into the desert. The desert does not give you warmth right away. The desert gives you something rarer, truth. And when you can endure that truth, you gain something the herd cannot grant, and cannot take away. A self with weight, heavy enough to stand firm, free enough to grow. Number 2. Why solitude unlocks greatness. Solitude unlocks greatness not because it makes life peaceful, but because it does something far more ruthless. It cuts the invisible strings pulling you back toward the herd. Nietzsche does not call it society. He calls its true nature the herd. The herd is not one specific group of people. The herd is a psychological pull, a kind of moral gravity that makes human beings willingly shrink themselves to stay safe. The herd does not need you to be radiant, because radiance exposes their darkness. The herd needs you to be neatly sized, predictable, easy to classify, and easy to control. And the most frightening thing is that the herd does not tie you up with a rope. It ties you up with the habit of being accepted. When you are still inside the herd, you rarely realize you are being pulled, because the pull is smooth, proper, wrapped in moral language. It speaks in the voice of family. Live like this for stability. It speaks in the voice of the community. Don't stand out, don't be different. It speaks in the voice of traditional morality. Don't be selfish, think of others. Those phrases sound beautiful, but Nietzsche wants you to look deeper. How many of them truly come from love, and how many come from fear of difference? The herd always wears the mask of kindness, because kindness is the slickest lock for closing the door to freedom. No one needs to hit you. They only need to make you feel ashamed for living your own way. And once you feel ashamed of yourself, you will whip your own back. The herd's mechanism works like an unspoken contract. You trade freedom for belonging. You trade truth for comfort. You trade your inner voice for applause. Look at a very ordinary scene. Someone is telling a story, excited, sincere, and then suddenly catches a passing glance, a slight frown, a thin smile. In that instant, the person automatically edits their tone, edits their words, edits their very self. No one gives an order, but the person adjusts anyway. That is the invisible string, dependence on the gaze. It is so subtle you mistake it for politeness, but in truth, it is the survival reflex of someone afraid of being cast out. And if you live inside that reflex long enough, you forget what it feels like to live by your own rhythm. At this point, if these lines bring up a moment when you edited yourself just because of a glance or a faint smile, write it in the comments. What did you drop in that second? And what sentence did you want to say but didn't dare to? Nietzsche hinted that among many people, a person easily lives like many people, thinks like many people, and loves like many people. Because the herd rewards sameness. Someone wants to devote themselves to a difficult craft, but then looks around and sees everyone bragging about shortcuts, fast success, and the heart grows restless. The changes are not loud, but they erode you bit by bit. One day, you wake up and realize you have become a version that is accepted, but no longer a version that is alive. And this is why solitude is precious. Solitude removes the stage. When there is no audience, you no longer have to perform. When there is no instant feedback, you no longer have to optimize yourself to be loved. When there are no structures of demand coming from other people, you can finally hear what you truly need. Not the need to impress, but the need to grow. Nietzsche does not worship distance from people. He worships self-mastery. Solitude is the minimum environment in which self-mastery can exist, the way fire needs clean air to burn. A newly lit flame, blown on constantly by the herd's wind, will die out or turn into smoke just to fit their space. Some people object. Living alone is selfish. Nietzsche would ask back, selfish or honest? Because many acts that look altruistic are really just a fear of being disliked. Many sacrifices that look moral are really just the fear of loneliness. The herd adores what it calls kindness because it makes people predictable, controllable. But greatness does not grow inside herd kindness. Greatness grows inside a kind of honesty that dares to take responsibility, dares to pay the price, dares to stand alone when needed. Solitude also cuts a subtler string: borrowed morality. The herd hands you a ready-made rule book. What is good, what is bad, what is honorable, what is shameful. Nietzsche calls it intellectual laziness, dressed up as morality. When you live by borrowed morality, you can always say, everyone does it. That's just how people do things. Solitude cuts that string with one simple move. It forces you to speak to yourself through the bare question, what do I want? What am I living for? You must stay in the emptiness long enough for what is yours to grow, instead of picking up what belongs to someone else. And right here, greatness begins to appear. Greatness is not standing above others, so they look up to you. Greatness is daring to leave the noise to protect a small voice inside, and then raising that voice into something with weight. Solitude does not make you better than others. Solitude makes you no longer belong to the herd. That is why solitude unlocks greatness. Because from the moment the string snaps for the first time, you are no longer being pulled toward the crowd, and for the first time, you can walk toward yourself. Number 3, Nietzsche's desert, where you reclaim the soul society has stolen from you. Nietzsche does not call the place you must return to a quiet room, nor a healing period. He names it with an image far drier and more ruthless: the desert. The desert has no applause, no one to hold you up, nothing for you to cling to except the spine inside your own being. And it is precisely there that you begin to reclaim the soul society has stolen from you, not by rummaging for a true self lying somewhere ready-made like buried treasure, but through a task far harder: excavating, selecting, shaping. Nietzsche's desert is not an escape from life. The desert is where life no longer shields you. If the city is where you can wear a mask without feeling suffocated, then the desert is where the mask falls away because there is no longer any reason to wear it. In the middle of a crowd, you can spend an entire day living as a role. But in the desert, the role becomes a burden. No one asks you to perform, so the performance reveals itself as an unnecessary kind of falseness. And that is the truly frightening moment, when you realize that so much of what you call personality is, in fact, nothing more than social reflex. But the desert does not only expose, it also gives power back. Nietzsche once spoke of becoming who you are as a task, not a gift. Many people hear that and imagine the true self as an original thing already sitting in the heart, needing only to be found again. Nietzsche is not enamored with comfort. He says it plainly: a human being is a structure under construction, and you are either the architect or the material being carved by someone else. Becoming who you are is not something you find, but something you make. To make it, you must excavate what has been buried, select what deserves to remain, and shape it by a standard higher than habit. Excavation is the first step. The desert lets you hear the undercurrent of thought that noise once covered. Someone sits still in the middle of the night, no screen, no music, no messages, and suddenly realizes the mind is full of other people's sentences, a parent's advice, society's standards, the sarcastic line of someone who once wounded you, the definitions of success pressing on your chest. When you hear those sentences clearly, you feel shocked because they do not sound like you. They are like sheets of paper plastered all over a wall, and you have lived in that room so long you mistook them for the original paint. The desert helps you peel each sheet away. Some you will keep because they are true and useful. Some you will tear off because they are only another person's fear passed into you. Excavation means daring to look at your foundation without rushing to label yourself bad or good. Excavation means discovering the desires that herd morality has called selfish, the doubts traditional religion has called sinful, the anger education has called disrespectful. Selection is the second step, and this is where Nietzsche separates you from the crowd. Selection means you no longer treat every emotion as worth obeying, every thought as correct, every desire as something that must be satisfied. Selection means you sort yourself like a metal worker. What is gold? What is rust? You begin to see that some parts of you are only copies. Those parts do not need to be hated, but they do need to be set down. And you will also see parts of you buried deep with a frightening vitality, a curiosity no one can extinguish, a hunger to learn at depth, a dream that refuses to die, an aesthetic standard that cannot tolerate mediocrity. Nietzsche calls that the seed of the higher. Selection means choosing to nourish that seed, even if it makes you different. Shaping is the final step, and this is where the desert becomes a forge. If excavation is digging and selection is picking, then shaping is carving. Nietzsche does not want you to live like a creature being led. Nietzsche wants you to live like a work of art. Shaping means building a style of living, a rhythm, a discipline, an attitude toward pain and pleasure. Shaping means asking before every choice, does this choice make me grow, or does it merely make me comfortable? Some people enter their small daily desert each morning. A blank page, a walk, a few minutes of silence, and then the question, what standard do I want to live by today? That is shaping. That is sovereignty. The desert also has something strange about it. It makes you hear your soul again, the way you would hear an instrument long covered in dust. You begin to tell the difference between your own voice and the echo of the crowd inside your head. You begin to have a quietness that feels unfamiliar. The quietness of someone who knows they do not need to be understood immediately. Someone who knows they do not need to explain themselves to exist. Someone who can endure being misunderstood, as long as they do not misunderstand themselves. And it is here that the soul returns. The soul does not return like a lost child. The soul returns when you no longer sell yourself in exchange for belonging, when you begin to live by a standard you set, and then take responsibility for that standard. Nietzsche wants you to understand that there is no real me lying ready, waiting to be discovered. There is a me created through courage and discipline. The desert is where you do that work, where you reclaim the parts that were stolen, and more importantly, where you decide who you will become by the force of your own will. You might imagine that once the soul has returned, everything will become calmer and lighter. But the desert does not return you to comfort. The desert returns you to truth. And the first truth is often not light, but the buried parts that have waited a long time and now must be faced head-on. Thank you for walking with me to this point. because this half of the journey is not easy to watch. If you are still here, it says something very clear. You do not only want something that sounds good, you truly want to see deeper. And from here on, everything will get sharper, because we are about to step into the part where solitude lays the darkness out on the table, where the things you used to avoid will begin to speak. If this content touched you in any way, give the video a like as a small sign that you want to keep going. And if you want this kind of content to appear consistently in your feed, subscribe so you do not miss the ending, where Nietzsche places you before the most ruthless question about your life. Number 4. Solitude lays the darkness out on the table. Solitude is not gentle. Solitude arrives like a cold gatekeeper, slamming shut every exit you have been using to run from yourself. When the noise disappears, the things you avoid begin to rise like mud stirred up from the bottom of a lake. Old trauma returns through some stray sentence you thought you had forgotten. Anxiety returns as a weight on the chest, as if a stone were pressing down. Anger returns not as an explosion, but as a low, simmering heat that makes everything you see taste bitter. Envy returns like a thin snake, sliding through the mind with a poisonous question. Why do they have it, and I don't? Shame returns as memories you want to bury, yet they keep digging themselves up and standing in the middle of the room like a figure that refuses to leave. Many people misunderstand this moment. They think solitude makes them worse. They think silence creates darkness. But Nietzsche would say the opposite. Silence does not create darkness. Silence only shows you what has always been there. In social life, when anger rises, you easily fling it at the person closest to you. When fear rises, you easily cling to someone like a lifeline. When envy rises, you easily turn it into sarcasm, coldness, or quiet rivalry. But in solitude, there is no substitute victim. No one becomes the trash bin for your emotions. You cannot pour it outward, and you cannot run anywhere. Solitude places you before two choices. Either you learn to endure and understand yourself, or you go back to numbing yourself again. This safe distance is like a laboratory. In a laboratory, poison is placed in a test tube, observed, measured, and named. Solitude turns emotional waves into specimens, so you can look at them without being swallowed. When you name something correctly, you regain power. When you see its nature clearly, you stop being afraid. Anxiety no longer means, I'm weak. It becomes a signal that something in your life is drifting away from your real values. Anger no longer means, I'm bad. It becomes a message that a boundary has been crossed, that cowardice has been accumulating. Envy no longer means, I'm contemptible. It becomes a mirror showing a desire suppressed, a potential being starved. Nietzsche does not teach you to moralize emotion. Nietzsche teaches you to decode it like a surgeon decodes pain. Some people keep changing jobs, changing environments, changing relationships, because they always believe the problem is out there. But often, that is only changing the backdrop in order to keep avoiding. Solitude makes you recognize an uncomfortable truth. If you carry an unprocessed wound, you will carry it everywhere. You can change cities, change lovers, change careers, but the problem does not disappear. And when there is nowhere left to run, you finally begin to face it. Solitude is the moment you stop running and turn back to see what has been driving you. If you are listening to this and suddenly realize you also often cannot stand silence, leave a small sign in the comments. You do not need to write a long story, just one truest line. The last time you were alone, what did you rush to do to fill the silence? Grab your phone, turn on music, text someone, throw yourself into work. And what were you trying to avoid in that moment? Perhaps one sentence from you will help someone else realize they are not broken. They are only learning how to face what is real. And if you are not ready to say it yet, just type 1 as a quiet admission to yourself. I am here, and I am practicing sitting still without running. Nietzsche speaks of nihilism as an illness of the age, when old values lose their force, when people no longer truly believe what they still say, when life becomes a chain of activities meant to fill the void. The mechanism of avoidance is the shortest road into nihilism, because each time you run, you send a signal deep inside. I'm not strong enough to face it. When that signal repeats long enough, you lose trust in yourself. You begin living on autopilot, on entertainment, on consumption. You can have a busy schedule and an empty heart. You can have many connections and no true presence. Nihilism is not the moment you think life is meaningless. Nihilism is when you no longer feel anything real, and you no longer want to create anything real. And here is an insight many people do not expect. Solitude not only lays the darkness out on the table, but it also teaches you that you are not that darkness. You are the one who observes it. You are the one responsible for it. You are the one who can turn it into fuel. Nietzsche does not promise a light life. Nietzsche promises a life with weight. If you cannot endure solitude, you may be living by a mechanism of avoidance, and that mechanism is quietly writing your life's script for you. When you dare to sit there, dare to look, dare to name it, you begin to do what Nietzsche calls the trait of the strong, turning crisis into understanding, turning pain into strength, turning darkness into part of you without letting it take the wheel. Number 5. Solitude forges discipline, resilience, and a style of living. Solitude is not only where you see the darkness. Solitude is also where you learn to stand upright without the stage lights. And it is here that something Nietzsche values more than any prayer begins to take shape. Discipline. Discipline is not a pretty schedule to show off, nor self-torture to feel serious. Discipline in Nietzsche's spirit is the ability to command yourself and obey yourself, even when no one is watching, no one is praising, and no one is rewarding. In society, much of what people call motivation is borrowed motivation. You push yourself because you fear falling behind. You strive because you fear losing. Those forces can drive you for a while, but they do not create inner strength. They create tension and dependence. When there is no one left for you to prove anything to, you are forced to answer one question. If no one knew, would I still do it? If the answer is no, then what you call a goal is only a performance. If the answer is yes, then you are touching what Nietzsche calls strength, a will that knows how to rule itself. Solitude forges discipline by exposing the real motive, then forcing you to replace a weak motive with a higher one, self-respect. Discipline is born in solitude because solitude brings you into friction. The friction does not come from the world, but from your own mind. On a morning when no one pushes you, the body wants to be lazy. On a tired day with no one to comfort you, you want to slide back into old habits. This is the moment the herd usually jumps in with the line, "Come on, everyone's like that." It sounds like sympathy, but it is really an invitation back to the average. Solitude has no such line. Solitude has only you and the truth. If you don't pull yourself up, no one will. And when you pull yourself up once, you learn something important. You are not as weak as you thought. When you do it many times, you begin to accumulate a special kind of confidence. Confidence that does not depend on praise, because it is cast from quiet acts. From discipline, resilience forms like a tendon growing on bone. Resilience is not enduring everything blindly. Resilience is the ability to stay with a long-term aim when emotions change, when life turns rough, when no one is cheering for you. In the herd, people easily confuse inspiration with strength. Inspiration is like a straw fire, blazing and then dying out. Resilience is like a coal ember, little smoke, but holding heat for a long time. Solitude forges that ember. Because in solitude, you cannot live by mood. You have to live by decision. You have to learn to work even when you feel no spark, to train even when no one knows, to read and learn even when it brings no immediate reward. That kind of forging makes a person someone with backbone, not merely someone with feelings. But the most subtle thing solitude forges is not only discipline and resilience. Solitude forges a style of living. Style here is not clothing, not an aesthetic posted online. Style is how you carry yourself through life. Your rhythm, your taste, your standards, how you choose what is worth spending your time and energy on. Nietzsche sees life as a work of art, and a great human being knows how to shape their life. Style begins with a very small act, choosing what you let into your mind. In the herd, people consume everything like snacks. The more the better. In solitude, you become stricter. What sharpens you, what dulls you. You begin to notice that a 30-second clip can steal the next 30 minutes through agitation, comparison, and distraction. You begin to notice that a just-for-fun conversation can sometimes leave an aftertaste of fatigue. And you begin to choose more carefully because you know the mind is a garden. What you sow is what will grow. This is Nietzschean aesthetics, living with choice, with taste, with awareness of the quality of experience. Solitude also forges style by giving you something rare, doing what is right at your own rhythm, without needing to explain. In social life, you are often forced to explain why you don't go out, why you don't join in, why you don't take the stable path. Each time you justify yourself, you lower yourself to fit the average. Solitude teaches you a kind of silence with weight. You don't need to say much. You let your life become the answer. You let your discipline speak. You let your resilience prove itself. Discipline, resilience, and style of living ultimately converge into one thing Nietzsche keeps emphasizing in many different ways: self-overcoming. You do not overcome yourself in bursts of impulse. You overcome yourself a little each day in silence when no one sees, still keeping your word to yourself. You still choose what is harder but truer. You still choose what is deeper instead of what is faster. You still choose what is real instead of what earns more praise. Solitude forges you into someone capable of that. And when you become capable of that, you begin to live like a work of art being shaped, not like a product being judged by the market. But Nietzsche is never satisfied with you merely becoming better. He wants you to test at the root whether the life you are shaping is truly worth living, or only a version disciplined to look good. And so, after you have learned to stand firm in silence, he lays on the table a trial more ruthless than any measure: eternal recurrence. Number 6. The ruthless test. Eternal recurrence. Imagine a very ordinary night. You have just turned off the light, lain down, and are about to hide inside sleep, when a voice without emotion whispers, "Everything you have lived, every moment, every mistake, every humiliation, every time you betrayed yourself, every time you lied just to keep the peace, will return, not once, but infinitely, the same. No fixing it, no next time." What would you do then? Would you panic and shout, "No way"? Or would you rise and say, "Yes"? Nietzsche calls that the heaviest blow upon the soul. The question, do you dare say yes to your life? This ruthless test does not aim at your achievements. It aims at how you live. It drags what is temporary into the light. Many people live as if life is performed only once, so they can endure, prolong, leave it for later, wait until things are right. But eternal recurrence is the question that breaks every sedative. If you had to live it again exactly as it is, would you still dare live by, "It'll pass"? If you had to repeat infinitely the mornings you wake with a heavy chest, the evenings you drag yourself home, the moments you look in the mirror and look away, would you still call that fine? Eternal recurrence does not come to punish you. It comes to show you what must be changed now. Because what you cannot bear is not life itself, but the way you are living it. Nietzsche wants you to understand that this test does not demand perfection. It demands responsibility for choice. The weak always want a metaphysical exit, a heaven that compensates, a next life that repairs, a miracle that erases everything. The strong, in Nietzsche's sense, do not rely on compensation. The strong learn to say yes to their life by making their life worthy of that yes. And that begins with small, concrete things, nothing airy or grand. The strong start, cutting down meetings that rot the mind, stopping a habit that leaves them empty, and setting boundaries even when they are disliked. The strong begin to live as if each day will return, so each day must have quality. This is where eternal recurrence becomes a new moral standard in Nietzsche. Not the morality of external laws, but the morality of honesty with the life you are creating. And why is this called a ruthless test? Because eternal recurrence does not let you hide. You must face the truth that many decisions you call temporary are actually shaping your entire life. You must see clearly that each time you choose what is easy over what is right, you are writing a script that may repeat. Nietzsche forces you to stare at the spiritual cost of delay. Delay not only steals your time, but it also steals your ability to trust yourself. A life repeated of self-betrayals becomes hell, not because life is harsh, but because you have turned life into a prison. Eternal recurrence, then, is not an idea to debate, but a question to live. You begin choosing things that, even if repeated, you could still nod to. And the moment you can nod to your life without needing anyone's approval, without needing anyone's forgiveness, Nietzsche would call it the sign of a strong spirit. A spirit courageous enough to say yes to existence, through the very way it lives. By this point, you may understand why Nietzsche does not treat solitude as a condition, but as a threshold. Once you have crossed it, you no longer look at life through the eyes of the crowd, but through the eyes of someone responsible for every day they live. You may still feel fear, but fear becomes only a wind passing through. From that moment on, you begin to live like someone who does not need permission to exist. The answer to every question in your life is not found in words, but in how you step into tomorrow. If you want to try it tonight, set aside 10 minutes with no screen, no music, no one. Place a single question on your heart. Am I living, or am I postponing my own life?